What's going on, everybody? It's Rich Perez welcoming you back into another dose of the rundown. We got a special guest in with us today, assistant coach for the Hofstra Pride, two-time Division I All-American for the Hofstra Pride, a member of wrestling royalty of the Patrovich family, Mr. Mike Patrovich.
Next up at 165, Mike Patrovich, Hofstra, and Zach Shanahan from Penn.
Reach down for his ankle, pull it up.
Dang it! Thanks for having me on, Rich.
Coach, it's a pleasure. It's an honor. How you doing?
Doing all right. In between practices.
Right. Love to see it. So as I mentioned earlier, you are a member of, like I said, wrestling royalty with the Patrovich family, and you know everything that name means to Long Island wrestling, what your dad did over at Islip, and then what you've done, you know, whether it was Half Hollow Hills, you know, Eastport, you know, your time spent at Razor, your club now, Barn Brothers, and you know now you being a coach at Hofstra. And you have a long background with wrestling as well. So can you kind of take me back to the beginning? I know your dad's name is Coach.
So my dad was actually not coaching high school wrestling at the time when I was growing up. I was probably about 5. My brother Joe was wrestling, and he was in charge. My father was in charge of the Connecticut youth program actually at the time. So that's how I started in wrestling. Eventually grew to love it, and then I got to middle school and decided that I was going to leave Connecticut and go to Islip. My parents actually, paid tuition for me to go to Islip High School. But I knew it was the best situation for me as a student athlete. And I made that decision. It was the best decision I ever made. And eventually it brought me here to Hofstra, where, I was blessed with two great head coaches and a lot of great coaches. So, the rest is history.
Right. You mentioned your dad was doing some youth coaching at the time. So what was it like wrestling for him?
It was the best, like I said, the best decision I ever made as a kid. And, he didn't push me to do it. It was something that I wanted to do. My brother Joe was still at Connecticut at the time. And, I made the decision I wanted to go to Islip and I wanted to wrestle for my father. And, again, it was just a special thing for me and will always be. It made our relationship a lot stronger. And I got to spend a lot of time with him, which was awesome. And, it was, like I said, it was the greatest decision I ever made.
Yeah, as far as your brother Joe, I know he was a state finalist. Like, typically with wrestling families, there's always some type of impact that the older generation have. I mean, what was it like having him around? Was he a guy that pushed you at all?
Oh yeah, I mean, listen, you always, the competition between brothers is as long as it's healthy is a good thing. And my brother set a high standard for us, growing up, and and I always wanted to be better than him, so that was motivating in itself. And, he was always there for me, always, in the stands after he graduated and I was at Hofstra. He was, unbelievably supportive to me.
Right. Well, Coach, you were a multiple-time county champ over in Section 11 as well as a state champ. And, those ice-lip teams that you were on were definitely powerhouse. I know specifically with your brother Ryan, that was when, they really got the ball rolling. But with you, what were the type of stuff, the type of things that you had to go through as far as training regimens and things like that to be able to reach those accomplishments?
Well, you know what? It's interesting because my father was a phenomenal coach. I would call him a drill master. He's very good at repetitions and techniques and going through a progression of technique during the week. So that training aspect in the high school room was a special one, and that's what having a good high school coach can do. Now, fast forward with all the clubs and everything, we had a nice little thing going. There were a few guys in the area that, we would have a high school coach open up the room after high school practice. It was almost like a club, but without the structure and, and the regular times and practices and things like that. So that's really where, I think a lot of the guys in the area at that time, I mean, we had a tremendous Section 11 team that year. For years actually, and that's a testament to we had a lot of dedicated high school coaches who would open their room and guys would get from all over town would get together and beat each other up and get better.
How was that? How was that coming about? Were you guys just kind of talking to each other on the phone to get together?
Yeah, I mean, there were some high school coaches like my father who, I think led the charge, and got guys together knowing that it was going to get us better. But yeah, I mean, we all became friends and, a lot of those guys I still talk to today. But yeah, I mean, we all communicated, but, a guy like Darren Goldstein used to open his room to anybody. My father did the same thing. Bobby Panarello was at Brentwood at the time. He did the same thing. I mean, we would just get together in anybody's room. Chris Messina, they were clubs, but not structured clubs like they are now.
Who were like some of the guys you were getting around with? I think was Jesse Jansen one of those guys, Mike Torriero?
A little bit, yeah. I mean, I got together more with Jesse once I got to college and we came back. We would get together once in a while. But yeah, Mike Torriero. I would get together with Justin Ionello, hot dog guy all the time. So yeah, it was a good group of guys. Messina.
Right. So, I mentioned the county titles and the state title as individual accolades for you. You were also a senior national champ in 2001, right?
Yep. Yeah.
That match is actually still on YouTube. There's a guy in the background who you can hear pretty distinctly. I don't know if you know who he is.
He might have been the only guy that picked me to win out of the fan base.
Yeah. I know that was an interesting opponent you had in the finals. Can you kind of take me through that run to that national title?
To be honest with you, I mean, that year, I had lost in the state finals the year before. I came back and my only focus at that time was to come back and wrestle the same guy and win in the state finals that year. So that's kind of what motivated me for the year. I didn't, I don't want to say I didn't think about nationals. I definitely did, but I had to focus on, the state tournament first. And then after that, like I said, we had that year in Section 11, we had so many good guys. We could get together and have national practices. I think that year they were mostly at Hop Hog. And, I had great training partners and was able to get great workouts, which at that time, like I said, without clubs, it was really difficult to get those workouts in once the high school season ended, but I was lucky enough to be blessed with good people around me and be able to train after I won a state title and go on to nationals.
Right. So, just kind of bring me a little bit through the run at the national tournament. I forget the opponent that he talked to me about it that you had your semis match. I know was actually a
Yes,
big match before you
I
even got.
wrestled. I believe it was a kid. I think it was Israel Martinez, who was highly touted guy nationally. But I had won my first match in the last 10 seconds before that. So I mean, I did not have an easy run. I won close matches, and then I just got on a roll. And listen, when you're in tournaments like that, confidence is everything. And I just I was on a high confidence wise, and I really felt like I was going to win a national title. I never questioned it.
What goes into that mindset for you?
At that time, I mean, I was really just like I said. I got a boast of confidence when I won a state title and I beat the guy who beat me the year before in Joe Mazurko. So I really was feeling like I was gonna win. There was nothing that could stop me. I was tremendously confident. And, every match I moved forward. I was trying to score points all the time. And that's that tournament kind of sparked my college career because that's the way that I wrestled the rest of my career in college. And I really didn't have that until that year. Like I said, I got a little more confidence my senior year, and I really started to move forward and try to score points and hand fought hard, and that just snowballed into college and helped me a lot.
Right, right. So in the finals, you faced Joe Johnson. I believe at the time he was already a commitment to he had already committed to Iowa. You mentioned you only had one person who really picked you to win the match. What's going through your head at the time when you're getting ready to go after this national title?
Listen, like I said, I was, I hate when people say that they don't get nervous because everybody gets nervous in those situations. I was definitely, nervous on a big stage again. But I had been there a few times, in the state finals twice. I was lucky enough to have been there. And, once the whistle blows, I just kind of did my thing and, never really thought too much, and I think that's an important thing in those situations. You got to go back to, all your training and, muscle memory and not think too much. Just do what you do.
Right, right. So, were you already a commitment to Hofstra at the time, or were you a late commitment?
No, I was committed to Hofstra in the fall. Actually, during football season, I committed to coming here, and Tom Ryan was here at the time, and this was this is the place to be on Long Island. So that's how I felt, and I love Tom. I had actually wrestled in his club for a year prior to that, which again helped me prepare that in my senior year as well. And I felt comfortable with him. I knew who he was as a person, and I was all in.
What were some of the other schools that were recruiting you aside from Hofstra?
To be honest with you, again, I hadn't won a state title yet, so I wasn't, in my eyes, highly recruited. I mean, I was supposed to take visits to Eastern Michigan and Binghamton and Ryder and places like that, but again, I kind of had my mind set prior to the start of the season, so the recruiting process for me was a little bit different than most.
Right. And I mean, when you were coming in because Tom came into Hofstra, I think was the first season was 95, or it might have been 94. But the Hofstra was really nothing at the time that he had came in, and he started bringing in guys like a Tom Noto, Roman Flazar, Eric Schmeezing, and guys of that caliber, and they started making a little bit of noise. And you were definitely one of those guys in the beginning that were able to help him turn the program around. I always hear interesting stories about him and his recruiting tactics. Some people would put that saying around him, he could sell salt to a slug. He's like a master salesman. I know Louis Rigiarello had a funny story about how he went into
Diner story, right? You're gonna tell it. That's a great story.
Yeah, he invited him to a diner with the two bags.
Yeah.
Pulling snow boots and things like that in one, and then the shorts in the other, asking which would you prefer. I know Charlie Griffin actually said he had called him up, and he's like, "You're coming, right?" And he's just like, "Yeah." And in his head, he's like, "If he sends this letter the next day, I'm going." And that's exactly what happened. Was there any interesting stories with your recruitment from Tom?
To be honest with you, for me, it was probably a lot different than those guys where he was recruiting upstate and out-of-state guys that he didn't have a relationship with. I did have a prior relationship with him prior to the recruiting process, being involved in his club at the time, which was really the only one. I call it a club, but he really ran a clinic, and so, I had a relationship with him, so it really was a little bit different of a process for me, but he still made me, I got to be honest with you, this is what he is great at, and as a coach is great at too. He made me feel special. Showed up to my house on Long Island with the assistant coach Derek Brophy at that time, and really made me feel like I was one of those, out of state, upstate guys, and made me feel special to the program. And and again, I felt comfortable with him, so my commitment was easy. But no, I don't have any Louis Ruggiero or Charles Griffin stories.
I mentioned, coming in with those earlier, those earlier groups that really kind of set the tone for the program. What was it like? I guess I kind of asked Charlie a similar question about, the environment and the atmosphere in the room. So, what was it like at that time competing for Hofstra?
I always tell this story, and it's something I remember, and I'm not good at remembering these things, but Tom did a camp at Maple Lake at that time. So we used to go for 2 weeks, all the Hofstra guys would go, and he would run a camp for 2 weeks for high school and youth guys, I think, as well. And we would go down to Maple Lake, Pennsylvania. And that was my first experience. I went from, being an undefeated national champ, New York State finalist, to going to camp in the summer and getting thrown off the stage and not getting a takedown for 2 weeks straight, So the environment was what it is, I mean, when you make that transition to college wrestling, it's never an easy one. I don't care who you are, how good you are. You got to be able to put your nose to the grindstone and take some beatings and just persevere through it. And, it's never a difficult, it's never an easy thing to go through, but my experience was a great one because, again, Tom was who he was, and he would motivate you regardless of what the situation and how you were feeling at the time. So, it was a great environment. I couldn't say enough about it. There were great guys here at the time. I mean, guys like Jason DeBruin, Dennis was still here as a volunteer. He was at that camp, actually. It was a special environment. The program was moving forward. They had some success already, with 2 All-Americans, 2-time All-Americans. And, the program was moving forward at the time. John Massa had just committed the year before, who was a Long Island grade 2 high school national champ. So, I mean, the environment in the room and the talent in the room just was on its way up.
Right. You kind of alluded to it too. It's something that, growing up on Long Island as a fan, I noticed, talking about how Hofstra really was the place to be. You go from competing in the gym to competing in that MAC arena. And you're a Long Island guy too, so can you kind of talk about how like the crowds developed over there?
I think that's what makes Hofstra, a special place, is that we have a great Long Island fan base for wrestling, and that fan base, I always saw the same guys in the stands, the same guys that I saw in the high school gyms, would be at matches on a Sunday and, supported the program. And, that was a special thing for me because they were friends of my father's, and, your father was there all the time. I mean, it's a special place to wrestle. And again, that environment in the arena at that time, we were bringing in, top 10 programs, every other week, so, it really was a special one. And, that's where we're hoping to continue to go.
Right. So you start off as a 157 pounder. Did you come in right away or did you take a red shirt?
I took a red shirt year. We had this kid, Paul Simone, who had actually beat me in a wrestle off that year. That was tough. And, I was actually having trouble making the weight even as a true freshman. So, I took a redshirt year that year. And to be honest with you, it was a great thing for me because maturity-wise, I really wasn't ready for the physicality of college wrestling, to be honest with you. I was a late bloomer. So it really helped me. That redshirt year for me personally was an important one.
Right. So you're coming off the redshirt year. Kind of talk about that first season as a whole for you.
Oh man, I had a different experience. Like I said, my redshirt freshman year was a tough year for me. I was cutting a lot of weight. I really wasn't happy. I was focusing more on cutting the weight than I was on developing and getting better. So for me, that first year was a tough one. And the reason I got through it was because of the coaches that we had, and the people around me and the great teammates that I had, because, I had hurt my shoulder. I tore my labrum that year at nationals. So then after having a rough year, cutting all that weight and being a little miserable with the sport for my first time ever, because I love the sport, I got through it because of the people around me. And then I had surgery and I tried to come back, and I had a difficult time that first year, but I got through it because of the great people I was surrounded with.
Right. And it's a no-brainer to move up to 165 pounds following that season. This is what now, 2003.
Yes.
Can you kind of get into me about that year? It was an interesting year too. I think Chris Strekowitz was on the team at that time.
Yes. Yep. Chris had All-American that year. Might have been 2004, to be honest with you. I'm really not sure. The biggest part for me was I caught a second wind in my career. I had the shoulder surgery. I actually had it twice because the first time I really didn't take. I tried to come back and I heard it again. It was sublux, and I had to have the surgery twice. And I had a second breath to my career because Tom had brought in Donnie Pritzoff at the time, which was an amazing thing, a two-time national champ. And luckily for me, he was actually still training for the Olympics and to make the Olympics at that time. So he was training full time. And that was something that changed my career, because now I just attach myself to his hip and everything he did training wise and his mentality. And, it really kind of catapulted me, into my college career,
Can you get a little bit more into Donnie and what he was able to do for you? He's coming in off a national title.
Yeah, I mean, listen, like I said, Donnie was full bore training freestyle at that time. He was going to, the Olympic Training Center, and he was, like I said, all I had to do, he was, working out twice a day. All I had to do was attach myself to his hip, and again, he kind of brought a toughness and an intensity to the room that was like nothing else. Because that's who he was. I mean, he wasn't, he was just to put your nose to the grindstone and work hard, and nothing else matters outside of that. And, like I said, I attached myself to his hip, right after I came back, and I had actually rehabbed much better that my second time around. So I was ready to wrestle. And, and again, once he came in, I attached myself to him, and he really, really helped me, move forward.
Right. Well, the program's going under a lot of different changes at this time. You mentioned one of them bringing Donnie in. You actually moved up from 165 to 174 pounds going into the 05-06 season, right?
Yeah.
What went into that decision to move up again? Was it more weight issues? Did you just feel more comfortable there?
No, it really wasn't as much of a weight issue. I knew I was big enough to wrestle 174 pounds, and 165 that year was just absolutely loaded. There were 15 guys that were All-American caliber guys. So I thought my best opportunity to go to the national finals and try to win a national title was at 174 pounds. And I went up that year, and I put a lot of time into, my weight training program and gaining weight and being as heavy as I could and as strong as I could. And, it was the best year I ever had college wise, coincidentally, I mean, the next year when I went back down was a little bit different, but 174 pounds, I was just focusing on developing, which is something as a coach that, you always have to contemplate with certain guys.
Leos, that season was definitely another one for fans and people in the program alike to be proud of. You finished with three All-Americans: John Massa, yourself, Chris Weidman. You actually had made the semis, wrestled Askren, correct?
Yeah, that's a match I'd like to forget, though.
Yeah, I won't get too into
No, it's all right. I mean, obviously Ben Askren was as good of a college wrestler as they really come, and was ahead of the times technique wise, and all the funk stuff that guys are doing now. He was just, phenomenal college wrestler at that time, and innovative in his technique.
Right. For you guys in that season specifically, I remember, John Massa, this was like years back on Facebook, had posted the banner thing of like who was in the top 10 at the time. This is probably second day, late session maybe. And it's like, he says, like the people in the Midwest were just like, Hofstra, like, what is that? You guys had been kind of clawing at it for so long. You didn't end up finishing in the top 10, but just at that time to be able to get like a taste of it, what was it like knowing where the program had been and where you guys had taken it?
No, it's funny because, if you're the average wrestling fan prior to Tom Ryan being here and the way he catapulted the program, none of those Midwest, big programs, Big Ten programs knew who Hofstra really was, besides Nick Gallo, which was way before that. It was a thing where, I remember walking into the elevator at Nationals that year, and they would see your Hofstra game, like, wow, where's Hofstra? They didn't even we were in the top 10 at that time, and they had no idea where Hofstra even was, most of those people. So Tom Tom Ryan put Hofstra Wrestling on the map at that, as far as those big programs go.
So specifically for you, you're finally an All-American. Can you kind of take me into what you had to go through individually to get to that point in that season?
Well, I mean, the year prior to that, I had lost in the All-American round in overtime, which was, I always say, all the moments in my personal career, that made me as good as I was were the worst ones. Like losing my junior year as a high school, I might not have won that high school national title because it motivated me to do things that, I don't think most guys would have done, or maybe I wouldn't have done had I won that state title that year. Same thing here. My sophomore year, I lose in the All-American round in overtime. And, the next day I went back to work. We flew home and I went back to work. And, it just motivated me to do things that maybe I wouldn't have done. I would like to think I would have, but, I mean, that hurt. I kind of turned into motivation. And eventually, I was lucky enough that I had a good spot at my junior year at nationals, and I wound up beating Jacob Klein from Nebraska in the quarterfinals and moving on to the semis, which, again, that feeling for me winning in the quarterfinals that first year was like nothing else.
Well, following a season like that, I'm sure you have expectations to as a team and individually to take things up another gear, but you guys kind of get I don't want to call it a setback, but some, news that you weren't expecting, that, Tom Ryan was going to be leaving to take on a new opportunity. When did you find that out, and, what's going through your head at that time?
I found it out shortly after, the season was over, and obviously Tom was interviewing for, a week or two. And I remember he called us to his house and told us, and, again, that's a life-changing, decision for him as a coach. And, I was old enough and mature enough at the time to understand it. It was an opportunity. Obviously, he's done unbelievable things in Ohio State, winning national titles and multiple national champions. And, that was something for him that I understood. I mean, it was heartbreaking for me because I was coming back, and actually I wasn't granted a sixth year yet, but I knew I was probably coming back for my sixth year, and losing him, being there for 5 years under him, was a difficult thing. But, it turned out that, it was probably, for me now as a coach, one of the best things that happened to me too, and I know it's one of the best things that happened to him as well.
Right. So Shiflett ends up getting the job over there. He brings in Joe Dubuque, who, like Donnie, ironically, was just coming off a national title himself. He still got Anspach there as well. They're definitely different coaching dynamics from I think actually your brother Ryan had actually told me this about Shiflett, that he's very he's an accomplished wrestler in his own right. Obviously, Tom was a national finalist for Iowa and things like that. Shiflett's a lot more of a technical guy, where, Tom's very, very intense. What was the philosophy change like for you?
Like I said, I didn't know it at the time, because it was change, and change is never easy. And it was a completely different philosophy, even just training wise. He had a lot of different practice formats, and he was very structured in preparation. So it was definitely a difficult transition for me. And again, I was still feeling the loss of losing Tom. And, when Tom Shiflett came in, it was tough for me. But at the same time, it was probably the best thing that ever happened to me, because I learned the different aspect of how to prepare and how to peak for the big tournaments, which obviously that year he did a tremendous job getting us to, peak and be fresh at the national tournament, which at this level is the most difficult thing to do as a coach. Having guys fresh at the end of the year is almost impossible. But, he did everything he could possibly do. And the way that we prepared was, it was unbelievable. And I learned so much from him as a coach, in a year that, I feel blessed to have both of them. And I think, trying to be, take something from Tom Ryan and the motivator that he was, and the way that, he believed in guys, and take, the training aspect from Shiflett. It's really helped me as a coach. And I already had an unbelievable base with my father, and learning from him, like I said, as a drill master and a high school coach, about, how important technique is. And then you adding, like I said, guys like Donnie Pritzloff and Rob Anspach. I mean, it was a special time for Hofstra Wrestling and for me.
Right, and I mean that's a season like no other. Hofstra's, in its history has had a lot of different unique things happen. Where it's a Nick Gallo to this day is still the only national champion in program history. Last finalist is Pete Capone, and but you guys, the '06-'07 team to this day remains the greatest team that you guys have ever put out there. Four All Americans: Charlie Griffin, James Strauss, yourself, Chris Weidman, finishing the top 10. What went into that season for you guys, and just kind of take me through the entire season.
Well, I like I said, it was a transition for everybody, every guy on the team, like any coaching change. I think certain guys struggle with it at the beginning, but Shiflett did a great job, and Anspach, being around at Dubuque, being added in. I mean, Rob obviously, kind of was the glue that kept everything together from the past, and the guys being used to Tom, and he's a great coach. So, that year we came out of the gate, we beat Minnesota, was the number one team in the country at the time in a dual meet, so I think that momentum really, kind of helped us start to believe in the new system and the change that was there. And, we knew that we were being prepared correctly, and that the current coaching staff could help us get to our dreams, which was, for all of those guys, was winning a national title.
What for you? What went into the decision to go back down to 165 pounds?
Well, listen, I got pounded by Askren in the semis the year before. That's the truth. So, I wanted to win a national title, and I really believed in my heart that, and the people, and, I believed because the people around me believed, and, I don't want to say anybody convinced me to do it, but there were people who I respected in the coaching staff that year. Were like, listen, you go down, you got a real shot at winning a national title, and chances are I did, so it was tough. I struggled that year. Going back to taking you through that year, for me personally, I struggled that year to make weight and to get myself back down to weight. I would say I didn't start making the weight right until probably mid-January. I mean, I was struggling. We went to national duels that year. I got hurt. I was really struggling to make the weight. So, the decision turned out to really be the right one, but it was a tough one, because I went from not cutting any weight really and focusing on getting bigger to now, cutting real weight and struggling through the year.
Right. So, but you end up making the semifinals that year. You wrestled Mark Perry. It's tough fought loss there, but I don't know if anybody saw that bracket going the way it did. Where Mark Perry ended up beating Johnny Hendricks in the finals that season, but you lost to him in a 1-0 match. So kind of for you, like take me through that a little bit.
I knew, it's funny because we're talking about the transition in coaches. Tom Shiflett hit the ground running with me personally. I knew I was trying to go back down to 65. I knew Perry was doing the same thing. I knew I might wrestle him. And the year before, I wrestled him for third and fourth, and he rode me and turned me. And that's really where he beat me, was on top. And from the point that Tom came in, till that point where I wrestled Mark Perry, we worked on bottom work and leg work. And, he really was a technician, like you said. And, that was the reason why I was in the match. It was the reality, because I spent so much time with Tom Shiflett and Rob Anspach and Dubuque at the time, figuring out how I was going to get out on bottom on a guy like that, because that's the only place I struggled. I could hand fight and wrestle with anybody. And I knew that, on my feet. So I spent a lot of time individually fixing what I was weak at, which was, bottom work. And, to go into the match, I mean, the beginning of the match, I wound up tripping over my own 2 feet in a position that I got nervous in, and gave up a takedown right away and fought my way back. And, but I was able to get out on bottom, and that put me in the match, and it gave me the ability where I was a point away from going to the national finals that year.
Right. So, obviously, you and a couple of the guys didn't finish your careers the way that you wanted to, but, nonetheless, you guys were able to accomplish something that, like I said, was, still has never been replicated or, surpassed at the program. What was it like for you? What's going through your head once, your career is over?
Oh man. To be honest with you, I was still thinking of wrestling at the time, which I wound up not doing because I went right into coaching and teaching. But, when my career was over, I obviously knew what we did that year was special, would be tough to top, especially since a lot of us were graduating. But I mean, there's nothing like it. We were little old Hofstra, in the top 10, that, like I said, people were asking the year before, where Hofstra is, so it was a great feeling as a team, as an individual. Obviously I didn't accomplish, and the other guys being all Americans is great, but, our goal was to win national titles. So, as individuals, I think we were definitely, feeling unfulfilled, but as a team, like you said, you looking back on it now, obviously it was something extremely special.
So, you mentioned all these coaches been around, whether it's your father, Tom Ryan, Tom Shiflett, Donnie Pritzloff, and me being around you as well. I definitely see a lot of that in you as a coach. Did you know right away that you were going to get into coaching, or was it something that like people kind of talked to you about?
No, I kind of, I was a phys ed major from the first minute I was here. So I really knew that that's what I wanted to do, was to move on to coaching. Again, my father being the biggest influence on me at that time, to do so. I saw what he was doing and how special it was, and how many kids he influenced, and how many lives he changed to open doors for guys, through being a student athlete. So, yeah, I was dead set on being a coach even when I was in high school.
Right. Just kind of take me through like how all these amazing people were able to have an influence on you. Because I remember when I was interviewing Charlie, and my dad's kind of said it too. Charlie mentioned a workout that you got, a treadmill workout that you guys were going through. And he said like he's just looking at you and how you're going through it, and it's something that he really took from you. And then my dad had actually mentioned that of like all the guys he's been around, that you're actually like the closest thing he's seen to a Tom Ryan, which I actually could kind of agree with that too, because I don't know if you remember this. This is like years ago, at the Ohio Tournament of Champions. Peter Pappas was wrestling in this match, and it's a tight match. I just remember you getting really animated on the side with him, and it definitely took me back to the type of stuff I used to see Tom Ryan go through. So like what were the type of influences that these guys had on you?
I mean, listen, Tom, as far as coaching in the corner, Tom Ryan is as good as they come, because he is as passionate as you can possibly be. And I remember knowing when I looked over to the corner that he was 100% all in behind me. Like his intensity as a coach, wasn't anything but he wanted to see you succeed, and he truly believed you should. And that's a special thing as a coach, and that's the passion that I have try to do the same exact thing for all my athletes as well. And again, his influence on me as a corner coach and a motivator, and the speeches that he gave us before and after practice, I mean, he was just special that way. And like I said, I took a little bit from my father. He's a drill master, and technically was ahead of the game. As a high school coach, my father was so far ahead technically at the time, and the guys that were coached by him were blessed that he did take the time to do clinics and things like that. Because the funny thing is my father was a football coach before he was a wrestling coach, and he took the time to go to clinics and spend the time not knowing what the new techniques were that were coming. As a high school coach, that was an unbelievable thing to do, and something that I took from him to make sure that you stay on top of the trends in wrestling technically. And like I said, Tom Shiflett was somebody that, really knew how to peak guys at the right time. He was very structured in what you did during the week, what you did, 5 days out of competition, 4 days, 3 days, 2 days, 1 day. He was very structured in that aspect. And I think it was the best thing that happened to the program at the time. Having to replace somebody like Tom Ryan is almost impossible, but Tom Shiflett was the perfect fit at that time.
Right. Well, Coach, I mean, your coaching background is, pretty much just as distinguished as your athletic background. You coached a couple of state champions now between Half Hollow Hills West and, your time at Eastport South Manor. And then, I mean, the guys that you were able to develop, first at your stop at Razor, and then now what you're doing at Barn Brothers is honestly second to none. How did you get into those roles?
You mean as far as like getting right into coaching and wrestling club, or?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Well, I mean, I was doing clinics for Tom Ryan when he was here, when I was in college. I mean, I just, again, I knew I wanted to go into coaching. So I was kind of one of the guys that when one of the coaches on the coaching staff couldn't do practice, they would ask me, so that's kind of how I started in the wrestling club clinic world. I was already doing it in college. So, for me, as soon as I got out of college and I knew that I wasn't going to keep competing, transitioning into a wrestling club, made a lot of sense. And, I had good people. My father was actually him and Teddy DePasquale, who started Razor. So for me, when I got out of college, it was easy for me to jump on board with them. And we built something, along with Don Donnelly was helping us at the time. We built something that was unbelievably special, and had so many kids that were in an environment at a young age that, had never happened prior to that on Long Island. I truly believe that. We had a youth program that was, a college type environment, and that's how those kids grew up. And I think it was, an extremely special thing. And you can see it by the kids that, that came out of that program that are still wrestling in college right now and having success.
Right. From I guess because you had your success at Half Hollow Hills West between the program. I think it had a couple top 10 finishes within Suffolk County. Tyler Grimaldi was a state champion for you guys. What actually led you to go from being a head coach over there to heading over to Eastport South Manor?
I was actually being excessed at the time. The enrollment at Half Hollow Hills was just plummeting, and they were cutting teachers and dealing with budget issues. And, it was kind of a decision that, I had to make, and I was hoping actually to land the phys ed job over at Eastport, which didn't work out for me. But that's really the reason I left was, I knew for my family I had to find a new job. It was hard for me to leave. I was actually, coaching football at the time. And I coached football there at West End East for a while. And leaving the wrestling program, which we had, really built to something, like you said, that was a top 10 type program from the bottom was something that was hard to leave. But, again, it was more of a decision for my family that, I knew I had to make.
Right. I mean, you go over to Eastport South Manor, another program that's, got its share of guys that are doing well. And you definitely put your print on that, even as an assistant. Can you just kind of talk to me about your time there, wrestling, not wrestling, but coaching with Nick Garone?
Yeah, no, I mean, listen, I wouldn't trade those years in for anything, both, having great kids involved in the program and having the success we did. And then, obviously anybody who knows Nick knows that, he's a great guy and a great time. And, we made a good team. That's the reality, is that we made a good team and built the program into something that was, real respectable. I think we finished maybe third in the state the 1 year, third or fourth in the state the 1 year.
Right. Well, it's kind of full circle stuff here. As I mentioned earlier in the interview, your family name and your name is synonymous with Long Island wrestling, and Hofstra is Long Island's program. So I'm sure people wanted to see your hat, you throw your hat in the ring when the job was initially open. But can you kind of talk to me about when the opportunity presented itself to you to become an assistant over there with Dennis?
Yeah, I mean, listen, I being honest, I mean, I part of Tom Shiflett was somebody that when I left here at Hofstra as an athlete, I remember him calling me up and he wanted me to be the volunteer assistant at the time, which is what I am right now. He wanted me to be the volunteer assistant at the time, but I had already interviewed and had my teaching job at Hills West. And I was really contemplating, as crazy as it sounds, financially, it would have been, I was already getting married and, financially it would have been crazy, but I really did contemplate it because I love college wrestling and I've always had a void. I've worked at every level of wrestling prior to being back here at Hofstra and being a college coach. I've worked at every level of wrestling from youth, all the way up to high school and doing the club and everything else. And it was something that I would go to college matches and I would have this void, a competitive void where I knew it's where I wanted to be. So for me, when Dennis made that call, and the position opened up, it was a hard decision for me to make, to be honest with you, because I was leaving Eastport and leaving some great people and great kids. But, like I said, I think it was a decision I made because I always had this void where I wanted to be back in college wrestling and in this competitive atmosphere because there's nothing like it.
Can you kind of talk to me about, because you're still running the club as well as being an assistant over at Hofstra now? Can you kind of talk to me about that dynamic and how you're able to kind of juggle that out?
It's not easy, I can tell you that. But yeah, no, it's my club is a full time job. I have great people like my brother Ryan helping me out. Jamie Franco's been helping me out. We got high school coaches like Corey Dolson involved, and my wrestling club is about the same thing that I was talking about with my college career. I was surrounded by great coaches and great people that just loved the sport of wrestling. They weren't just there for themselves or for their ego. They were there because they love the sport of wrestling and what it does for kids. And that's the dynamic in my club right now that I love. And it's not an easy thing, to be honest with you. Obviously, we're talking about two opposite ends of Long Island, Manorville to Hofstra to Hempstead. So it's not easy, but it really is what I love. What I'm passionate about, and I like being able to do it on all levels. It really is a special thing. I work with kids that are just walking into the room that are 5 years old, first time wrestling, and I come here to Hofstra and I work with guys that have been multiple times state champs and are ranked top 25 in the country.
Right, right. I guess before I get you out of there, I kind of want to talk about a little bit more about your coaching career at Hofstra. You've been a part of a lot of success. Between your high school career and then your college career. That's something I think is what you bring to the program right now is something that's very invaluable, especially coming in as an All-American over there. What are kind of the things that you guys are doing to help bring that level back to the program that it once had?
Well, I mean, listen, right now, we got to start keeping some of these, phenomenal high school wrestlers on Long Island here home at Hofstra. And, when I first got here, I remember sending an email to all the coaches, and I truly still believe this, that, it is much easier as a local wrestler, if you're one of those guys, to be successful here at Hofstra than it is to go away, and that is something that, I'm still trying to change that mentality right now, on Long Island again, because, it is something special when you look up at the stands and you see the same type of people that were supporting your whole high school career, cheering you on, and were in your corner, still in your corner in college, and looking up in that MAC arena into the stands and seeing those people that you're comfortable with, that are behind you. And, that's the one thing that for me, I truly believe we have to continue to do a better job, is by keeping the kids home. Because you can see all the kids that, have gone away in the past 10 years. It is very difficult to be successful. And that's a reality. If you go back and you look, there's been some guys who have done it, and it is a special thing. But, I believe that the reason why Hofstra was having so much success at that time is because we were keeping guys like myself and John Massa and Chris Weidman, James Strauss. They were all Long Island guys. If you look back to those years, those were Long Island guys, and they were successful because of the environment here and the potential of, always being away at college, but, being able to go home. Right. I mean, that is a special thing. College wrestling is a difficult, difficult mental game and mental journey. So being able to be a little bit comfortable when you walk out of this room or you're off the mat competitively is a special thing. And I know for me, I probably wouldn't have been able to do it, getting through my injuries and, all the things that I dealt with personally in my career. I know would have been difficult had I been away. And my brother Ryan actually went through it too when he went to Ohio State, and wound up coming back here to Hofstra. I mean, it's a tough thing to do on your own, and having your family and your friends and the people who have gotten you to the point of being a really successful high school wrestler, still having them close by as a college guy is a special thing, and, again, it's just something that for me was special. So I think that's right now one of the things we need to do a little bit better job of. But we're still, like I said, we're still doing things and combining some of Tom Ryan's stuff and Tom Shiflett stuff. And I've taken stuff from all of those guys, Rob Monsbach, Dubuque, we're that's what a good coach does. They take the great things that they've learned from other great people and they mesh them together and make it fit their philosophy. And I think we're doing a good job of that right now in Hofstra, and we're moving forward.
Most definitely. I could definitely say as a fan that I'm seeing that too. A couple national qualifiers a year ago, and bringing guys in as well. Dylan Ryder was actually one of your guys, and to see you coaching him now at the college level is a beautiful thing. But Coach, I want to thank you for coming on. Like I said, it was an honor, and I hope to see great things continue to come for you and Hofstra alike.
Thank you, Rich. I appreciate it. Thanks for having me on, and thanks for what you're doing for wrestling too. You know, the more podcasts, the more info, the more people out there. You know, wrestling is a great sport that a lot of people don't really know about it. Guys like you doing what you're doing is a great thing for the sport.
Of course, of course. So it's Rich. It is Coach Mike Patrovich, and we will see you guys next time.